Over the past year, I built and sold tens of thousands of dollars worth of automations for clients all around the globe. Most of them were built using Make.com. So in this 3-hour course, I will show you everything that I learned about Make.com from building over 1,000 different automation systems for our clients so that you can have the same sort of success as a freelancer or business owner. Hope you enjoy. Before going forward, I want to explain the 4 most important concepts when it comes to Make.com and how to use Make.com effectively. You will hear this concept repeated over and over again, so being able to familiarize with those would be key in order to get an understanding of that. The 4 components are scenarios, modules, triggers, and operations. Now, let's see each one in depth. Here you can see an example of a scenario. So the scenario can be defined as a sequence of steps or actions to automate any sort of process. As you can see here, we have a very simple scenario with 2 components. Those 2 components are actually called modules. So each scenario is made of multiple modules over here. And modules are defined as building blocks within the scenarios. So if a scenario can be defined as the whole recipe, the modules are the individual tools that you can use for that specific recipe, for example. Then what we have over here is the trigger. The trigger is always the first module of a scenario. So the module that starts the actual scenario. The trigger is a specific action or a specific events that makes this scenario starts. There are different kinds of triggers. You can have an instant trigger, meaning that the scenario starts as soon as a specific action happens, or there are time triggers, meaning the scenario starts every specific set minutes, set hours, or whatever the case might be. So that is the definition of a trigger. The other component here, and the last component and a very important component, is the operations. Operations are all the actions that are performed within a scenario, and in Make.com, an operation is also a currency of the scenario, meaning that the number of operations that you use makes up the price that you pay for Make.com. Now that you know this key standards core concept, let's look at the interface and how to navigate the interface of Make.com. So right now we are within the actual interface of Make.com, and we will see all the different parts one by one. We start with the actual dashboard, which is this part over here, where you can see all sort of information. First off, there's a sidebar over here where you can navigate across all the different sections, which we will see in a bit. But first off, we focus on this initial section over here. Here we have the plan. So the plan that you are currently running, what is the price of that? What is the amount of operations that you have per month? Meaning what is the amount of specific actions that you can do on a monthly basis? What is the amount of unused actions? And then you also have the billing interval. So in this way, you always are able to quickly glance how much are you spending, how much operations do you have, and if you need to upgrade your plan or not. The other important component over here is this graph over here. This graphs allows you to understand how many operations you are spending each day. And by the way, operations is the value that Make.com uses for each of the different parts, each of the different scenarios. And so this is very important to keep this monitored, and you can have an understanding of how many of those are you spending. Then the next section over here is active scenarios. So over here we can see which are the scenarios which are currently working within Make.com. So as you can see here, we have all sort of different scenarios. Right now, we will go to the next sections, which is the actual scenario page. So in here, you can have a view of all the different scenarios and all the different workflows that you created within Make.com. So as you can see, we have a section called all scenarios over here, where we can have a look at every single scenarios that we created within our specific organization. And then we also have folders over here, which we can create to organize different workflows according to whatever logic we have. For my instance, over here, what I'm doing is I'm organizing everything into business departments. So everything related to content is in one side, everything related to finances is another, marketing, onboarding, all sort of stuff over here. Now, the next step that I want to go through is the actual scenario builder and how do you actually build a workflow within make.com. So we go here, we click on create a scenario, and here we are within the actual canvas of make.com where all the workflows and all the different scenarios take place. First off, we start off by getting familiar with a canvas. So a canvas is like a blank slate over here where you can have all sort of different bubbles like this that represent the specific modular specific action that you do. When you click on this, as you can see here, you have this all apps. By scrolling over here, you can see which apps are available for you to use. And in this way, you can also get a sense of what is available, what are different apps that you can use, and play around with your make.com account, for example. Here, we can select the app that we want to use. So let's say we want to use Google Sheets, for example. Within Google Sheets, we select that, and inside here, we find the different actions. Those are different actions that we can perform as a workflow form. So for example, here we have add a sheet, where allows us to add a new sheet to an existing spreadsheet, create a spreadsheet, and all sort of different actions, such as, for example, search rows, and yeah, everything that is actually possible within Google Sheet. So let's say we want to search a specific row. Every module like Google Sheets has this menu over here, which is a module configuration. So in here, what we can do is we can actually configure our module in order to work and in order to make sure that we get the specific actions for this module. So in this instance, what we can do is we can search for the specific spreadsheet that we want to use for this, and we can also limit the number of rows that we can search. This configuration model changes depending on the application. In here we have this thing, but if we go, for example, into Stripe and we go into create a payment, here we would have all sort of different options, as you can see. This is different on a case by case. So let's start here by searching for a lead list, for example. So here we are able to search for a specific spreadsheet, and then here, as you can see, there are different fields which appear based on different information that you add. And here, for example, we don't want any kind of filter. We don't want to have this ordered. We want the sorting order to be ascending, and then here we have a specific limit. So let's say we just want to have 10 rows. So in this way, we set it up the module so that it will get 10 rows from that specific file, from that specific sheet of that specific spreadsheet. So here, what we can do is we can either right click over here and click on run this module only, and this will only run this module, or run the full scenario over here by clicking run once. So let's click on run once and see what is the result looking like. So as you can see over here, we have all sort of different information, which might be overwhelming at first. So first off, at the top, we have this part over here, which is the actual operations that we did. Here, we just did one operation. And so, but within here, we have two different things. We have the input, which are the different parameters that we set it up over here, for example, and then we have the output, which are the different parameters that we got from the operation here. So as you can see here, there are different bundles. Bundles are packages of information that you have within make.com, and each bundle here, for example, represents a specific row. So here we have in bundle one, we have one row with the first name, last name, link new URL. In bundle two, we have a different row over here. So this is a little bit how this section works. You will look at outputs a lot, specifically when looking at the scenarios and needing to have an understanding of that. And so, like having a look at this and see how can you look at specific bundles and specific amount of information is always a useful thing. But again, we will touch on this later on in the training. Let's start to have a look at each of the different tools which are present over here. First off, we have the run once, which allows to run the whole scenario. Secondly, we have this scheduling part. So this allows us to trigger the automation on and off. So right now the automation is off and is only working when we click on this button over here. But if we set this to on, this will run every set amount of time. We can define the time by going over here in the schedule settings. And so here there are different ways of running a scenario. So in this specific instance, this is set to run at regular intervals every 15 minutes, meaning that if we would switch this to on, every 15 minutes we will have this scenario running, consuming one operation and getting 10 rows. There are different ways of configuring that you can see over here. So you can run this once, you can run this every day, you can run this specific days of the month, specific dates, and there are also ways of scheduling that in an advanced way. So for example, if you want a scenario to only run during working hours, what you can say is run the scenario every 60 minutes, and then here you can define the scheduling. So let's say you want this to run from 8:30 up to 6:30. Okay, and then here you can select the days in which you like this to run. So let's say we want every day, but not Saturday and Sunday. And here you can also select the months. So here we would have a scenario that will only run from 8:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m., for example, every working day and every month. So this is a cool little nugget that you can use. Here you have the save control. Always press the save control because this is very, very important, and you don't want your scenario to be cancelled or to be removed. So get into the habit of continually pressing the save button. Then we have scenario settings, which we will see in a bit because this is the most comprehensive part with a lot of different options. Notes is a part where you can add a note related to a specific module. So here, for example, what we can do is we can click on add a note by doing right click and add a note. And here we can add a specific note to a module. So this module gets 10 rows from a lead database example. In all reality, you will likely never use notes because this is not easy to read, and people are not gonna look at notes. So the best bet here would be to actually record a video, and then once you have that video recorded, add that together with the automation when you are either delivering that or you create a documentation folder with the video explaining the automation, and that's the best option. Here we have an option to auto align. So here, for example, as you can see, we were here, and let's say we add multiple module in some sort of casual way. So let me add a couple of random module over here and like have it like so. With the auto align, we can have this automatically aligned. So this is a cool option to have everything formatted in the correct way. Then we have explain flow, which is useful to help you understand what is the flow doing and what are the different options of the flow. And then finally here we have different things to export the blueprint, meaning that we can export this specific scenario and import this into other organizations. This is very useful when you need to some sort of copy paste the different scenarios across organizations. And we have both export and import again, as I mentioned, and then we have previous version. So here you can select the previous version that was created in the past. If, for example, you have some errors right now and you want to go back to a previous option. Let's look now at the scenario settings. So over here, we have a couple of different options. The one that you will likely use is this one over here to allow the story of incomplete execution. The other ones, personally, I haven't used in the past because you will probably have to use the others only in very specific situations. So this is not actually needed 90% of the times, I would say. Let's go to the next section, which is the connections part. Within here, you will have every single connections that you created. Connections are basically ways of connecting the automation platform, so make.com, with other kinds of tools. So here, as you can see, for example, we use Google Sheets, and Google Sheets needs to be connected to your own account in order to be used, in order to have access to your files and do specific things. Over here, we have a bunch of different things. So we have Airtable, we have Google Analytics, we have Gumroad, and there are over 2,000 different apps that you can connect. So there are a lot of different possibilities. Here we have something that is a little bit buggy. So let's go forward with this. And yeah, here you can have access to everything here. Another thing that you can do within here is you can either verify that if something is not working correctly right now, or you can delete connections directly from here so that you want to remove that and you don't want to use it anymore. So does that. Now let's go to templates, and we also see the other sections such as webhooks and keys, which are the two most important ones in the next section. But first off, let's go to templates so you can have a sense of what is present over here. Here, there are templates already created by the make.com community that you can use as a starting point for your automations. I think there are close to 2,000 templates or so. So there are really a ton of different templates. But I personally never used any of those because it's way easier to actually build stuff on your own and get a better understanding of what you are building compared to using something that someone else created. And in order to add a template, you also need to start a guided setup. You need to follow this specific setup. And yeah, this is not used by that many people. Another important thing that we haven't seen in our scenario that we build is the history tab. So within the history tab, you can have a look at what happened in the past for specific integrations and specific workflows that you build, so that you can get an understanding of if they worked. So if the status is success, it means that they generally worked. What is the consumptions of operations, what is the consumptions of data transferred, and also here, if you wanted to, you can go into details and you can have a look at each of the different modules that were run. This is very useful when it comes to debugging stuff and having an understanding what didn't work, what was wrong, and things like that. So in this instance, for example, we had an error, and yeah, this is again very powerful functions to have. Now, knowing how to navigate the interface is quite important, but probably the most important thing here is actually building workflows. So let's start with designing the first one. First off, what I want to give you is a couple of rules when approaching different workflows and designing those. Let's start by defining a step-by-step approach to building this. So the most important thing that you need to do are the first step into the planning. And this is especially important at the beginning because it will save you a lot of time during the actual development of everything. So first off, what you need to do is you need to clearly define the goal of the workflow and add additional context if needed. So here I have a specific framework that I use where we define the time period. So when the automation runs, the action that triggers the workflow. So if it is a time-based automation or a form submit or something along those lines, and then the set of actions that the automation performs. So this is an example of this framework applied to what we're gonna build right now, where every time we receive a new form submission on the website, we notify the team by sending an email with the lead information. So as you can see here, we have the time is every time we receive a new form submission, which also acts as a trigger. And then here we have the action defined. So we notify the team by sending an email. With the lead information is an additional context that we provide over here. Secondly, here, what we need to do is we need to create a list of tools that are involved, and also list out what actually triggers the workflow. So what I did over here is I mentioned the trigger. So every time we receive a new form submission, and then the tools involved. So in this instance, we'll make the automation as easy as possible. So we'll just use Gmail for this. So this is an actual additional step because it helps you understand what are the different tools that you're going to use, making sure that you will have all the connections ready and things of that nature. But we're going to see that right in a second. The last point here, prior to start the actual build out, is to map out the flow using a diagram. Right now, like this might not seem that useful because like we are working with a very simple diagram where if you do if action 1 happens, do action 2. But when you will be working with more complex diagrams and more complex automation, having diagrams like the following will really save you a lot of time into the designing of the automation workflow. So in here, as you can see, we have the red part, which is the trigger. We have the actions that we will do, and here we also have the additional context. So with that, this is this is a great start, and with this we can actually start the build out. We are now in Make, and we need to start with the build out, which you will see here in overlay. So the first step that we need to do is we need to have a form ready in this specific case, right? So what we will do is we will use Tally in order to build forms, which is an alternative to Google Forms. You can also use Google Forms, you can use Fill Out, you can use any kind of forms available. And I will show you later on why we will use Tally instead of a Google form or something along those lines. So here we start by creating a form, and what we will do is we will simply create a lead generation form like the following one. We will use this as a template, and we will publish this. So right now we have our own form that we can test out and see. So this is the actual form. It seems pretty simple and pretty understandable. What we need to do next will be to go into Make and start with this initial part of setting up this trigger. So what we'll do over here is we will search for Tally, and here, as you can see, we have the distinction between triggers and searches. So here we have a trigger to watch new responses. As you can see here, this is instant and this is acid. Acid means that it's conformed with specific norms when it comes to like how the data is structured and how the data is sent. Instant instead means that the response will be received instantly within the workflow, making this workflow run every time you actually receive a form response. The reason why we use this as opposed to Google Forms, for example, is that Google Forms as these watch responses, but these watch responses is not instant. So what we will need to do in this instance would be to schedule the settings over here to run every hour or every 2 hours or every 30 minutes, whatever the case might be, in order to have that specific workflow work. Instead, by using an instant one, we can do that immediately. We can run this immediately. So what we'll need to do here will be to create a webhook. So we will need to create a webhook for the first workflow. Here we have the form ID. We can select our own one. Connections was already set it up, but You can add a connection over here in a very simple way, and then we will save this. So right now we have this first webhook applied. And don't worry if you don't understand what a webhook is in detail. We will explain that later on in the next section of the video. But basically a webhook is a way of sending information immediately after some specific action happens. So in this case, what we will do right now is we will test out this integration. One important thing that I always suggest is to rename those, adding specific naming convention that makes you understand what is the action doing over here. So we'll say watch lead gen responses as an example. And what we will do right now is we will click on run. So right now, this is waiting for us to send a lead gen response. At this stage, we will do the testing and we will create a lead gen response with dummy data. So in this way, we can actually use this information and test this information to build the workflow. So let's go to the lead generation form over here. And what we will do is we will create a couple of random information. So let's build that. We have this company name, GM International, and then company size. Here we can select this to 10 to 100 and click on submit, for example. Now, if we go back to make.com, as you can see, this actually run. When this run, we add a response ID, a submission ID, we add a form name, as well as we add the fields part. Within the fields over here, you can see the different fields that were completed in the form. So you see first name, last name, email, job title, company name, and company size. So yeah, those are all the information that we will be sending out to our Gmail part. So the next step that we need to do over here, it will be to set up a Gmail action to send an email. So in this instance, we will set up a specific action through my own account to another account, but like you are free to send out emails to whatever account you want. So let's let's use this account that we use right now. In subject, we will add new lead received, for example, and then in content, we will create the actual content over here. So we will say new lead received, lead information, and here we will complete the lead information. So we'll use first name, or we can use full name, for example, and use first name and last name as fields. So in this way, we actually select the fields. Then what we will use is we will use email. Okay, we will use job title. We'll use company name. Let's use this, and then company size. So yeah, this is the way we will set up this, and we will create this first lead received. What we will do now is we will run this. We will complete the lead generation form by refreshing this, by adding some random information. So let's say Mike power, and then let's say Mike.power at powerinc.com. We say CO, company name Power Inc. Company size, let's put 10 to 1000, and then we click on submit. Now we click on submit. Let's go back to make and see if everything worked correctly. So if like what we can see right now is that everything was prompted in the correct way. So what we'll do right now is we will check the email, and as you can see, we received an email over here from Riccardo. So like because this is the account that I used, and this was sent to another account that I own. So this is actually correct. But as you can see here, the format is a little bit off. So we have the information here available. We have the full name, we have email, we have everything. But the format is actually what is missing. So I wanted to create this example so we can also see what is the debugging process looking like. So here, as you see, we tested this out. We see that we want to create a better format, and so we will do that. The reason why we had that specific problem is that because Gmail uses HTML tags, which are ways of displaying information into the internet. And so what we will do right now is we will format this into HTML ready formatting. And the reason why we do that is so that the actual formatting is correct right now. So we will use this, which means break. So we will divide the lines using this one. We will use this B, which stands for bold. So we'll make this lead information bold. And then we will use paragraphs for each step. Keep in mind, like this is HTML language that uses specific set of characters. So you can search for HTML tags and you can see which are the tags and which one can be used. But this is specifically for this case. And I wanted to use this as an example because this is not the easiest possible thing. And so you can also see how to troubleshoot specific things and how you can solve specific things by leveraging other areas of programming, other areas of coding as well. So what we'll do right now is we will just add these paragraphs, and then we will have another version which we can test out again. So let's do another test. Again, here we can see that everything is worked in the correct way. So let's go to the email and let's see if we got another email. So as you can see right now, we got another email, but the formatting here is correct and it's the same formatting as what we wanted. So this is an initial example on how you can create a very simple scenario, how you can troubleshoot that to improve that. But now let's see a couple of the more intricate and additional parts of the of Make that makes this tool really, really powerful. Make has internal connections with over 2,000 different applications around the web, but not every app is included within Make. That is why it's key to learn how HTTP requests work, how the HTTP module works, what are webhooks, and how they can be used to integrate external services directly within Make so that you are able to automate every tool that has an API. So let's see the difference between those two things, the HTTP and the webhook first. Here's an image for you showcasing what is the difference looking like. The HTTP request is basically a communication that you send to a server in order to ask for some information back. So let's say you need to ask for a recipe to a cooking website. And so what happens is you ask for the recipe data and then the server gives you back the data. So this is how HTTP requests work. Meanwhile, webhooks are quite different, are reactive instead, and they are triggered based on an event that is happening. An example is the one that we saw the previous module where we have a form submission, and when the form is submitted, we send a webhook directly to the user. In this case, the user is the make.com scenario or application, but right now we'll see a little bit better how this actually works with 3 different examples. We will start with a make a request over here, and as you can see from the screen, if we click over here, we will need to add a bunch of different information. Now, don't get overwhelmed by what we need to add, because we will see 3 different examples right now of increasingly different level of difficulty to add this kind of information. The first thing that I have to say in regards to how you can make practice with this is there is a URL in GitHub called public APIs, which shows you different APIs that you can test out and explore so that you can test different things over here. There are a bunch of different categories that you can use, and you can use this as a valid starting point. What we will use in our case will be the free dictionary API over here, which is a way of getting words description information directly using this system over here. So the system and the way these APIs are defined is through a document or a documentation. The documentation usually will have a couple of basic information, such as the URL that we need to add, the method that we need to add, and any eventual query, headers, or body parameters. So this is a fairly simple example of a dictionary API. Within this one, we just have a URL over here, which is defined, and it says get basic syntax of a URL request in this way. So here, for example, they give you an example and they say how you can use this. So this can be used by adding a word over here at the end, and you can send the request. In this specific case, since we need to get information, we will use the get, even this is not defined over here. In other cases, if we need to send information, we will use the post. This is generally the case, but you need to check the API depending on the different things that are available. So what we need to do over here is we need to copy this URL. Then we go back to make over here. We add this URL here, and then we can add the word that we need to find. So for example, we search for automation. We define the method as get, and we don't need to add anything related to headers or query parameters because we will see those in another example. One important thing over here that I suggest you to always turn on is this parse response over here. This helps you see the information that you are getting in the format that make as. So in this way, you are able to have a better visibility of the data that you are getting over here. So this is all the information that we need for this specific API. So get automation definition. So this is important to have. What we'll do right now is we click on run this module only, and we will see for the result that we got over here. So there are a couple different things within here. First off is the status code. So the status code that you want to have over here is a 200 or 200x or whatever status code, which means that the request was a success. Other different kinds of status codes that you can have are 500, which means that there was a server error, so there were problems related to the server and you cannot do generally anything related to that. And there are also 400 errors, which are errors that are related to the client. So maybe you wrote something wrong or something was not correct or things of that nature. Then we have headers and data, which are advanced things that you can look at and see. In this case, this is not necessary at all. But the most important thing that is of interest to us is data. So within data, if we explore this data over here, what we can see is we have one single element with the word automation. And then here we have different things. So we have phonetics, we have meanings, we have license. So if we go to meanings, for example, and we go to definition, here they explain what is the definition of this. So the act or process of converting the control of a machine or device to a more automatic system. So in this way, we were able to send information directly through here, through make.com, and get a result directly over here. Now, let's see a couple of other examples. The second API that we will explore is this tomba.io API, which is a way of finding B2B emails around the web. So this is a tool that can be used with an interface. So they actually have an interface. But the other thing that they have is they have an API. So a way of doing the same actions that you can do within the interface directly through make.com, for example. And this is amazing when it comes to documentation. So if we go over here, if we go to resources, what we can find over here is documentation. So one thing that you will need to search all the time when it comes to working with HTTP modules and things like that is always search for name of the software, API documentation, and you will find the documents. So here we go into the documentation, and here we will have all the documentation related to the actual software that we can use. So first of all, what we need to do over here is we need to get familiar with how the documentation works and what are the different things within the documentation. Keep in mind that there are different kinds of documentations that you can see, different tools, different ways of displaying that, but the information that you will find will always be the same. You will find an API endpoint, which is the base URL. You will find the specific actions that you can do within that specific URL. You will find the method that you will use, as well as other different things. So right now, for example, what we need to look at when it comes to this specific API is the authentication, meaning how we can use this API using our own authentication, because in the first one that we checked, you don't need to sign up, you don't need to do anything. In this case, you would need to sign up using some kind of tool like Tomba, for example, where we will need to create an account, and once we create an account, we'll need to create an API key that we need to use over here. So first off, this is one of the most important parts that you will always see in every single API documentation. Here you also see a couple of different errors that are available. You will see the rate limits and what they are, as well as a bunch of different things. To be fair, this is a very complete API. So what you will see then is specific endpoints or specific information. We will not explore every one of them because there are way too many, but let's focus on domain search, for example. With domain search, here you see search emails are based on the website. So you give a domain and it returns all the emails found on the internet for that specific website. So here we have this HTTP request that we use. So domain search with domain equal to domain, and this means that we will have to search a specific domain and find a specific information. So what we have over here is we have the actions that we need to do. Over here in the right, we have how this is supposed to be created. Here we also have what we need to add. So here we need to add headers of this content type application JSON, xtomba key, xtomba secret, and possibly we can also add parameters if we wanted to. So right now we saw a couple of we saw the structure of this. Let's try to create this within make.com. The first thing that we will do over here is sign up to this tool. So I will create an account right away right now. So let me create a password right now. And we are right now within the tool. So over here, first off, the most important thing will be to find where we can get access to the API keys for authentication. This is likely in developers, into settings, or things of that nature. So for example, what we can do over here is we can go to, click on this name over here, this user, and here we see this section called API. So in this section is where we can get the API keys and do the same actions that we saw prior. So we will be fairly limited with this, but we can definitely use those. So let's start with an actual example of how this works. And let's go back to this example over here. So first off, what we'll need to do is we'll need to create a URL, use a specific domain. So we can use Stripe or we can use Uplifted Consulting, and then add this information as headers. So let's do that with a make a request module first. First off, what we will do is we will copy the URL over here, which is the complete URL with all the information. The method is always get. Here they were mentioning headers over here, which we will need to add. So let's add this content type. And one thing to keep in mind over here is that you will have the key, which is the initial part, and the part after the two dots is the value. So over here we have content type, we copy this, we add this into the headers over here, and then we add the second part. One thing to keep in mind here is that you will have a collection, meaning you will have the initial part, which is the key, and then you will have the part after the two dots, which is the value. So, and this needs to be added separately within make. So here in headers, we click on add header. You see we have a name, which is content type, and then we have the value, which is application JSON. Now we will need to add the two header which are responsible for authentication. So we saw here at the beginning that authentication is done with this header called Tomb-by-X key and Tomb-by-X secret, which needs to be added in the header. So here they also mentioned that. What we have over here is with this Tomb-by-X key, which is the name, and let's copy this over here. And for the value is the value that we have present over here. So I suppose this is probably one of them. So this is the key, and then the secret is the other one. So let's copy this. Let's copy this key, and then what we do is we copy the secret over here. So the secret, and then we go over here, we click on copy, and then we copy the secret over here. So in this way, we have the authentication created right here. The next step that we need to do is we need to add the domain. This part of the domain is called a query parameter. So everything after the question mark is a query parameter and is divided into the key and the value. So the key is domain and the value is stripe.com. And what we can do within make is we can use this section called query string to add those without adding those directly to this to the URL. The reason why we are doing that is just to keep everything a little bit on the cleaner side. So here into the query string we add a new query and we add the domain, and for domain here we can add the Stripe one, so we can add stripe.com. So everything seems to be completed over here. What I would like to have over here is another query parameter, which is limit. And here they mention that limits specifies the max number of emails to return. So in this way, we can limit the actual number of results. As you can see over here, there are some parameters which are required, such as domain, and some parameters which are not required, such as the limit, for example. So what I will do over here is within the query string, I'll pass the limit as 2, as an example. Then other than that, we don't need to add any additional information if we don't want to. And what we can do is we can test this out and see if this works correctly. One other thing here is the parse response should always be set to yes. So let's test this out. So after the test, we got a data error over here. You will see plenty of those if you are trying to play around with this. And it seems that the error is related to limit over here. So the actual thing that I tried to add on top of it. So here we can take two approaches. We can go back to read the documentation correctly over here, or we can remove the limit. So in this case, maybe what is wrong is the part related to the number that should be present over here, because here they mentioned 10, 20, 50, and I set this to 2. So what could happen if we send this to 10? Let's see about that. So let's rerun this. As you can see right now, the status code is a 200, so it means that it actually worked correctly. And what we can do is we can look at the data and look at how the data is divided. So the data will be different for every kind of API. So you need to get at least an understanding of how this works, but you will see this better also in the next section. But here, for example, if we explore this, this is divided into organization and emails. If you go into organization, here we can see a couple of information regarding Stripe, for example. So here they mention what is the location of Stripe, what is the street address, the postal code, the description of Stripe, and also we see a bunch of different information over here. Then we have the emails, which is the part that is of interest to us, and we have 10 different emails. So these are different emails related to different people within Stripe. And yeah, as you can see here, for each of the emails, we have information such as the email, what is the first name, the last name, gender, phone number, the position, as well as their LinkedIn. So we have a bunch of different information available over here if we wanted to. So we saw two examples over here, a free API and a paid API. Right now I want to show one last example, which is using OpenAI as an API. The reason why I want to do that is that within Make, potentially what you can do is you can go over here and you can search for OpenAI and find OpenAI as a module directly within Make. And so you can create a completion and you can do every kind of actions that we are about to see directly within the module. The reason why I want to use an API instead of using the module is to show you that every application within Make is just a more beautified version of an API call. So if you are able to master API calls, you will be able to use any kind of service or any kind of any kind of service around the web. So let's start by going to OpenAI and searching for the OpenAI API docs. What we have over here, as you can see, is a different format of displaying API information, but the information is always the same. We have an authentication part, so how we authenticate with the application. We have the different endpoints, the specific URL that we need to use, and then all the information if we scroll back. So here, for example, we have this part related to API keys. So they mentioned that OpenAI using API keys for authentication in a similar way as Tomba used. So we'll need to get our authentication key. And here it mentioned all API requests should include your API key in authorization HTTP header as follows. So we'll need to put this into a header. Next, what we have over here is the same command that we can see related to how this works. The best thing that we can do over here is we can look at an example of how this is shown. Within this API, you will find a lot of different information, but you will always need to find what is the part that is of interest to you. So for us is the chat part and everything related to the chat. So here we have the URL plus the endpoint that we will use. So as you can see here, we have this chat/completion. And this is not a get, but this instead is a post. The reason for that is that we are sending information to OpenAI and OpenAI is sending us information back. So we will send a prompt with some information and we expect OpenAI to give us the responses back. Over here, you can see what is the format looking like and what are the different parts of that. So what we will do right now is we will take this example over here and copy this back to Make. One small thing that I forgot to add over here is how do we get the API keys within ChatGPT within OpenAI. So we need to go to platform.openai.com/API keys and we will see this screen over here where we can create a new API key. So right now let's create a testing key, which will be used for this project only. And right now you will see the key itself. We will copy this and then we will use this one within make. One thing that we will do over here is that we will not use the maker request, but instead we will use the make and API key auth request. The only thing that is different between these two modules is the fact that the API key or the authorization part will not be present over here, but instead it will be handled using the credentials. The reason for that is that this is more secure if you are using different API keys. So like this is way better in general. If you need instead to change the API keys over here on the fly because you are working with different API keys or things like that, then the maker request makes sense. But in the majority of the times, you will use this one because it's way more secure and you will use your own API keys. So what we need to do over here will be to just go to add. So in this way, we can add a OpenAI key. So we will name OpenAI over here. And then if we go back over here, if we go back to authentication, here they mentioned that this should be a header and this should be bearer OpenAI key. So we need to have this bearer part prior to having the OpenAI key over here. So what we will do is bearer, and here we can also see if this is correct, and then we will copy the API key. Over here, you will see that we have the key placement. So here you can decide where the API key should be placed. There are some instances where the API keys will be in the query string. There are some instances where it will be in the header. So here, since they mentioned the header, we just selecting the header. And then here the parameter name, which is something that we'll need to change, and we will need to change this to authorization. So in this way, this is handled, and every time we need to use an API key for OpenAI, for example, we can use this. Obviously, we will tend to use the module 90% of the time, but I wanna show you this example because this could be really useful to understand how HTTP module works and how that can be used. So next, what we do over here is we go back to the chat because we want to create a chat. We will copy this URL. So let's copy this. The method here will be a post. So this is defined over here. The headers over here, we just need to add this content type header because we already have the authentication part. So let's add this over here. Okay, and then what they mention over here is a request body, This is something that we haven't touched before, but the request body is the part over here into the body type. So what we'll need to do over here, we'll need to go and create a row one. Here we have the content type, so this sets the content type to application.json. So what we can do is we can also remove this one because like this is not needed anymore. And then over here, we need to have the request content. What we will do right now is we will copy this one because it's an easier example to use. And we will use this one over here. One thing you can do is you can press Command Shift V to have a formatted version over here right now. One important thing is that here you will see which are the required parts, which are the not required parts, and so you can have a sense of what is needed and what is not needed over here. So in this part, what we'll do is we set the module to GPT-4o. We set the list of messages that we need to send, such as a system message and a user message. And then we click on yes over here to parse the response and see what is the result looking like. So if we click on OK right now, this is a post ChatGPT or OpenAI, whatever you want to call it. And so if we check this, it seems everything is correct. So let's try to run this. Okay, so as you can see here, we got a 200. So it seems that everything worked fine. If we go over here into the data, we will need to explore the data a little bit. And here, for example, we have these choices, we have this one part, we have this message, and within the message, we have the assistant response. So in this way, we actually got the same result that we would get on ChatGPT. Also, the other thing which I think could be useful over here would be to check an example directly using the module to do a comparison over here. So as you can see, the module, the model over here, the module, the make default module is way easier to add to work with instead of a code like this where you need to add custom code. But if you get a sense of how custom code works, you can definitely do that. So as you can see here, we have messages, which is messages, and then here you have role and you have content. So here we can add a system role, and we can essentially copy this one word by word. So let's do URL helpful assistant, and then let's add another one as a user, and let's use hello. And add max tokens set to 0. So if we run this, you can see over here that the result is essentially the same. So this is just a beautified version of using this. But if you are able to master this part, you will be able to use this in every single module. Now that you got an understanding of how HTTP module works, let's see what is a webhook and how that works. So as I explained over here, the webhook module is like a listener or a doorbell. So what it does is it waits for data and it reacts for data from an external service. So the external service sends the data and the webhook reacts by triggering the scenario. This is very useful when you don't need the scenario to work all the time, but you need the scenario to work when a specific action is happening. So the simplest example over here is when a new form is submitted, but there are other instances such as when the message is received or any other cases like that. So what we will do right now is we will check how to set up a webhook within Make and what are the different steps that we can do over here. So we are here in a new scenario. What we can do right now over here is we can click on webhooks, and over here you will have two different types of webhooks. The one that we will use right now and the one that is the easiest to use is the custom webhook. So here we have this one defined. Here you need to click on add to create a new one. Give it a clear name mentioning the trigger or the action, such as new form submitted. You click on save over here, and then over here what you will have is you will have a URL of the webhook. So what is basically happening is when you copy this URL into the external software that you'll need to use and you set that up so that is a webhook, you will automatically receive the information back to this URL. So let's show an example by going to tally.so, which is a software that we also used in the past to do the first setup. And what we'll do right now is we will create a template such as a lead generation form. Let's recreate this one and let's use this one. So what we'll do here is we'll click on publish, and what you can see over here in this section is this integrations part. Within the integrations, there are different ways of integrating with that. One of them is this webhooks part. So send event for new submission to HTTP web points. What we can do over here is we can click on connect, and here we will ask us for the endpoint URL. So if we go back to make, we take this one, we copy this one, and this is the one that we need to connect to. And by the way, we did the same operations at the beginning in an automatic way done by Make. So this is another way of doing the exact same operations. And again, I want to show you this so that you are able to both do the automatic operations, the simplified operations from Make, as well as doing the more advanced part over here. Then we need to click on connect, and this will be connected over here. So if this is connected right now, what we can do is we can go to the lead generation form over here. We can fill some informations. So we can say melon, we can say watermelon, we can say email melon.water@gmail.com. Founder, we say watermelon Inc. and define the company size and click on submit. And once we do that, we will be sending this information directly to the webhook. So right now we have the webhook, we send the information, but we don't see anything right now within Make. Why is that the case? The reason is that we haven't set it up this to run automatically, but the information is already stored within Make. So if we go back over here, what we will see over here at the top is that there is one record in queue waiting to be processed. This means that Makes creates a queue of the information that are sent to webhooks. And what you can do is you can show the queue and you can show the details about the information that we received over here. So this way you can also get an understanding of what are the different information that you can see from Make. The next step that we can do is we go back over here in the scenario, we click on run once, and you will see this message meaning that there's unprocessed data in the webhook queue. So this means that we already have some information. We can choose to process information or wait for new information. In this case, what we will do is we will use existing data, and in this way we have all the information that was sent to that webhook. So this is a way of working with webhooks and sending information to webhooks. This is just an example, but keep in mind webhooks can be used across a wide variety of different services to send information when a specific action happens in that external service. And what you can do is you can search for that specific action within the software, see if it's present, see if a webhook is present, and connect the webhook in the way that we saw over here. One of the key abilities that you'll need to have in order to work within Make.com will be to recognize the different data types, understand how to work with the different data types, and understand what kind of operations you can do with specific data types. This is key in order to map different operations, because every single module within Make will give you back an output, and that output is displayed into a data format that you can check. Now, this is an example of a potential e-commerce that gets data of a client. So here you will see a lot of different information and a lot of different data types. Keep in mind that you can always see what is the data looking like by clicking on this bubble over here. And within here, you will see all the data that you have available. In this case, we have a bunch of different data available. So like different data available over here, as well as different data available into arrays, which is this part over here, collections, and then other different arrays and collections. One important thing that I have to say prior to showing the different data types is that you can see the actual result encoding by clicking on this button over here and clicking on download output bundles. In this way, you will be able to see the raw format that is used in coding. This is very helpful because instead of looking at the formatted version that makes provides. You can look at what is the actual data looking like, and this is especially useful when it comes to doing mapping or doing troubleshooting of specific things. So let's start over here with a couple of points over here. First off, we have here an ID and we have a number over here. So this is the first data type. This is a number. The number will have a format that is just display it. So if we have a look over here, we'll see that this ID will be a number displayed in the following way. Next up, we have two different data types which are the same, which is name and email. Name here is John Doe and email is in the following format, john.doe@example.com. Both of them are text data types which are shown in a specific way, which is using this double quotes over here. So if something is within double quotes, it means that it's a text part. Then what we have over here is another element which is active, which is set to true, and this is a boolean. A boolean is a value that can either be true or false. The way this is shown within code is similar to the numbers. So you see here there's no double quotes, and if we were to use double quotes, this true would not be a boolean, but instead it would be a text. So this can be either true or false. Then we have account balance, which again is another number, but with a dot over here. So it's like a float number, is not an integer number, but you can still do operation with that. And then over here we have the created date, which is the actual date where this account was created. And as you can see here, this is displayed in Italian. This is October, the 7th October. But the most important thing is that make always formats date into a easy to read format for you. So in this case, it formats this into the 7th of October 2024 at this specific time. So if we look at the code, what we can see over here is that the created date is formatted in the following way. So you can see over here, you will see the year, you will see the month over here, and you will see the date. This is a standard format that is used for every kind of data. And then over here, there's another interesting point. You will see 1232. But over here, you see that we have 1432. So it seems that this is 2 hours forward. The reason for that is that makes formats the dates based on your own time zone. So in this way, you are able to know what was the time in your own time zone. This is something specific that we will see later when we talk about formatting data and working with dates, but keep this in mind because this will become really, really important. Then what we have over here is we have an array. This is a tags array, which mentioned that we have multiple elements related to this specific user. So here we have 2 elements, which is premium and beta user. The way the array is created within code, within the actual output, is the following. We have a square bracket over here, opening square bracket, we have a closing square bracket, and then over here we have 2 text elements. So we have a premium and we have beta user. Within arrays, keep in mind we can have different kinds of formats. So we could also have numbers, we could also have dates, and we could also have booleans, for example. Now let's see also address, which is a collection. So a collection is actually what we are seeing right now. I didn't want to bring this up prior, but essentially this output that we have over here is a collection of information. So the collection is divided into 2 parts. We have the key. The key is the element at the beginning, which is like the descriptor of what is the element that we are looking at. and then we have the value, which is the actual value of that element. So in this instance, what we have is we have a lot of different information about a specific user, and this information is divided into key value pairs. So we have a name, so this is the name related to the user, and then here we have what is the actual name looking like. This is the format used in all programming, and it's very useful to get an understanding of this. Now let's go back to the address part, which is divided into street, city, and zip code over here. Street over here has some numbers over here, but also has some text. In this specific case, this is just text, because we wouldn't need to do any kind of operations with this specific information. So this is just display as text. City, any town is displayed as text also, and the zip code instead is displayed as a number. So if we look over here, we can see that the information is displayed as I actually mentioned you. Then the other component that we have over here is an array. So we have another array which we already saw over here, but this is a little bit of a different one because this is an array of collections. So similar in the way that we had over here, where we have different elements within an array, what we can also have within an array are different collections or different ways of displaying information. So you can think about this in the following way. Here we have purchases, and a user can purchase different kinds of elements, right? So each purchase has specific information inside. So if we open the one, we see the information related to one purchase. If we open the two, we see the information related to another purchase. So here we can see, for example, item as an information, which is laptop, which is text again. We can see price equal, and we can see also the date, which is formatted in the following way. And then here we have the other element, which is collection over here, and price, which is headphones with price and the following date. So this is it when it comes to data structure. I would also like to show you a couple of additional things. So here you see that we have additional information, and we have this element over here, which seems to be a number. So like this is a number, so we suppose that this could be a number. This is not always the case, because it always depends on what is the output looking like. What we have over here as an example is a text number, which is displayed as a text, not as a number. Why is this actually important? This is very key, because if we were to do some kind of operation within that number, we would see that the information that we have related to that would be fairly different from what we would like to get. So let's say that we want to sum 10, and then what we do is we select this element over here, we click over here, and here we can select the plus, so we can do sum, and we can click on sum 10. So let's try to run this, and let's try to see what is the result looking like. Okay, we run this, and if we look over here, you see that the sum is not correct, because we added 10 at the end of the element over here instead of actually doing the sum. The reason is that here we had the text, and so we just added additional text as on top of that. So in a similar way where we could add some information to name. So here if we sum this and we say hello, and we run this again, what we will see is that the information that we get over here is John Doe hello, for example. So it's quite important to understand what is the data type that you have, and sometimes if something does not work, you can check the raw data and have a better understanding of that. Another cool thing that I would like to show you in this section over here is regarding all the information that we have over here. So the way this is the bundles, those bundles are created is using JSON, which is the key language that is always used when you are working with make.com. So what we can do here is we can copy the JSON, which is delimited by these square brackets. So JSON is essentially a collection, but a big collection that can be worked on. And what you can do is you can go to edit JSON editor online, and you can copy this JSON over here to have a better look at the data. So in this way, like this is an actual trick that I use all the time where I need to copy paste different data, have a look at it in a more clear way, and see where problems might be. Another thing that you can do is you can copy this JSON over here, and if you go back to make and you need to, for example, parse this JSON from another part, what you can do is you can click, you can search for JSON, you can click on parse JSON, and you can create a JSON script string over here. So as long as this string will be correct, you will see the exact same output that you received from the webhook. This part is especially useful when you need to look at information related to what you have in front of you, and also for testing purposes. So for example, I need to send this information by making a purchase. So instead of doing that and making a purchase all the time, what I can do is I can create I can like send the information once, get all the information, add the information into this block over here, and then I can perform all the different operations that I need to do with this one. So it's very useful when it comes to doing actual testing and doing things of that nature. Now, what I want to do is talk a little bit about bundles, because this is another key concept and you will see this used a lot of the time. Make usually doesn't move data into a single block or an item, but data generally comes into bundles. Bundles are specifically some packages of data that are moved through each step of the scenario. So you can think about a bundle as a container that holds specific information related to a scenario. So right now, let's see an example of a Google Sheet, for example. Here we created a simple search row module to search within this specific sheet and have a limit of 10. So when we click on run this module only and we see what is the result looking like, at the top over here, we will see an input bundle, which is the information that we sent out, and then we will see an output bundle. In this case, we have multiple bundles over here. So as you can see, we have 10 different bundles, which are 10 different packages of information. So here, for example, we have the URL of a person, the first name, the last name, and within each bundle, we would have all sort of information. In this case, every single row of Google Sheets as a bundle over here. Bundles are really important to help you understand how the data is moved within make.com. So for example, over here, we have this bundle and we have 10 different bundles of information. What happens if I add a variable over here, and let's call this variable name, for example, and let's select first name. What will happen in this specific case is that this block, this module, will produce different bundles. Will produce 10 bundles in this specific case. And if this produces 10 bundles, it sends each information from each specific bundle to this tools get variable over here. So if we click on run, we will have one operation consumed over here, and over here we will have 10 operations consumed. The reason for that is that we perform the same operations 10 different times, one for each time, each bundle. So as you can see here, the name is dummy. If you can see here, the name is Victoria. This is Christoph. And if we go back over here and we look at the bundle, we can see that bundle number 1 had dummy, bundle number 2 had Victoria, and bundle number 3 had Christoph. So this is how the bundling part works. There are essentially 3 different ways in which you can process the bundles. So those are single bundle processing, creating bundles from arrays, and then aggregating different bundles. So I will show you a couple of examples here in this document. So first off, we have single bundle processing, which is the one that we saw right now. For each single bundle, we do a specific action or set of actions. So let's say we have 10 different bundles and we need to send an email to each. So we will use this technique here, the single bundle processing. This is especially important where you need to perform an operations for every single package of data. The thing to keep in mind over here is that this will consume an amount of operation equal to the number of bundles that you have times the different operations that you need to perform along the way. The other thing that we can do is we can create bundles from arrays. This is something that we will see later on when we talk about iterators. But in this example, what we have is we have a webhook with different users. So we have a user number 1 and a user number 2. And in order to transform this into bundles, we need to use an iterator. The iterator basically takes an array, so a collection of information, and then outputs 2 bundles. So in this way, we can actually create bundles from arrays. The last operation that we can do with bundles is aggregating those into a single component. We will see that a little bit more in depth into the aggregator and iterator section, but just so you know right now, what you can do is you can take all the outputs and add those all to a single aggregator. Let me show you the example over here, for example. So what we can do is we can create an aggregator over here. And by the way, right now I will just show you a very simple example. We will see this a little bit more in depth in the future, but we can do something like that, where we create this aggregator. We create an example over here, and we want to have the first name of this aggregator, of this array aggregator. So if we run this, for example, what will happen is we will aggregate all the information that we have over here into 10 different bundles in an array over here of different elements over here. This is useful if you want to filter out specific information, or if you want to keep this information and use this information later on in the process. But we will see also the different examples to that. Right now, this learning this key concept about bundles is really important, so that you at least have an understanding of that, and we can go into more and more complex topics. In the last chapter, you were able to understand the differences between the various data types within Make, and also what are the bundles and how you can use that. Now we will focus on one of the key features of Make, and probably also one of the most misunderstood feature and difficult to grasp features for people, which is iterators and aggregators. Now, those 2 elements are pretty simple to understand once you get the gist of it. So let's start with that. First off, let's start with an iterator. I will give you a couple of key ideas here, and then we can go into the building phase and test this out. So the iterator is a module within Make that is able to take one array, so one array of data, and process all the elements within an array one by one. In this way, if you have different information within an array and you want to process each information in an individual level, you can do that by using the iterator. Let's focus on the following example over here. What we have here is different information about a specific user, and what we want to do is we want to put all the purchases of this specific user within a Google Sheet. So over here we have all the information, which is exactly the same as one of the previous modules, but the thing that is the most interesting to us is the purchases here, which is divided into different collections. So each single collection has a item that was purchased for this specific user. Now, one of the things that happens if you don't use the iterators is that you can try to map out things in the following way by using the system over here, selecting the purchases and selecting the item, for example. So if we go and test this out, you will see that the result that we have over here is always the first element of an array. So by default, when you set up these variables in the following way by using the variables that are present over here, the default values that you will get will always be the first value. So in this way, you will never be able to get all the values that you have present within the actual system. That is why instead of using this and formatted this set multiple variables in the following way, we will need to use a iterator. So you can search for iterator, and here they also mention that they require an array. So let's put the purchases array over here, and what you can do also, if you see over here, is you can over and see that purchases is an array. Here they require an array, so this is the correct element to have over here. Okay, yeah, now we have this iterator. One thing that I suggest you also is iterate over and mention the element that you need to iterate over. So in this case, we will need to iterate over purchases. And let's test this out again. What happened right now is that we sent an input of an array, so the array of these two elements, and we received an output of two different bundles, one for the first element and one for the second element. This is key because it also helps you better understand how bundles works. Iterator then is basically a way of turning an array into multiple bundles so that you can process each bundle individually. So in the following way, what we can do now is we can attach this to add rows over here, which is a simple Google Sheet file that I created where we can log our different purchases. So when we click on this module and go down here within the values, what we'll need to do is we will need to add the different values that we have over here. One thing that you will see when you click on over here will be a new element over here of the iterator. Within this element, you will find each of the different elements that you used before. So by using these variables within make.com in the following way, we will iterate over this different element, meaning we will have a first run where we will add one single row with the element that are present in bundle 1, and then we will have a second run where we add the elements that are present in bundle 2. So let me click on OK. Let me run this once again so you can see the result. As you can see over here, we have our specific bundle. Over here, we did the iteration. So we had the two different outputs. And since we have two different outputs here, we will have two different operations. One operation for the first element and one operation for the second element. So if we go back over here, we can see that we have laptop, we had headphones, and then we have the two different prices. Now, there are a ton of examples and a ton of different practices that you can see, but the most key concept to remember is that iterator take an array as an input and output bundles that you can process in a singular way, one after the other as output. So this is key for you also to have an understanding of how this system works. Now, let's see what is an aggregator. As I mentioned over here, the aggregator is the exact opposite operation compared to the iterator. So while the iterator breaks down the data of an array into different bundles that you can process individually, in the aggregator, you combine different elements into an array. And it's mainly used for data summarization, or if you need to use that in combination with filtering to gather all the data in a single place. There are different kinds of aggregators that you can use. So there are array aggregator, there are table aggregator, there are text aggregator. We will mainly focus on array aggregator for this kind of tutorials because this is by far the most used throughout Make and throughout all the scenarios that you're gonna see. We are now back within Make.com to use the aggregator over here. So what we have over here is a list of different purchases, and our final goal would be to only have the purchases which have a specific price point. So let's say a price point of over 500. So in order to do that, we will need to do two different operations over here. First off, we'll need to iterate over the purchases, because in this way we can analyze each purchase one by one. And finally, what we need to do is we need to add an array aggregator to condense and aggregate the information into a single element, into a single block. As you can see over here, the information that is available within the array aggregator is a little bit different compared to the iterator. So first off, what you have over here is a source module, which identifies the module with multiple bundles. So in this case, the module with multiple bundles will be the iterator. Then you will have a target structure type, which we can set to custom. And then here you would have a list of each of the elements that you would like to aggregate. So for example, if you want to build a more simplified version of an array and only have the information such as the item, you can do that by clicking this one over here. Generally, what I tend to do is I tend to add all the elements over here, because in that way you will not have any problems. And if you need to use the different information later on within the system, you will have those kind of information. So yeah, we select only the elements present of the iterator, but as you can see over here, there are also elements related to the user account, to the user information. So let's just select this one and click on OK. Now you will see that the iterator and aggregator will have this gray area, which means they are connecting within each other, and it tells you where the aggregator starts and when the aggregator ends. Here we actually need to do another thing. So we will need to set a filter over here. Now we'll see filter later on in next chapter, but we can also create a simple filter over here. So the idea here is that the price of the filter, so we want the price of the filter to be more than 500. So this is a simple filter that we are going to use, and we will use the iterated element of the iterator. In this way, we always check for the next element, and we use that as the reference over here. So let's click on OK, let's click on save, and let's run so we can see what is the result looking like. Okay, so over here we run everything. What we did over here is from an array, we deconstructed this into multiple outputs, multiple bundles. So each of the bundles have their own item with their own price. Over here, we filtered out the element by a specific price, and finally we aggregated everything into a single module. In this way, we have at the end one single bundle with one single array with only the element that have the price over 500. So in this way, you can see that you can aggregate data, you can iterate on data, and the most cool thing is that we just used two operations in order to do aggregator, iterator aggregator, sorry. So this also saves you a lot of different operations if you want to run something like that. Two additional components that you will use over and over are routers and filters. In this image, you can see both of them applied. So first off, what is a router? The router is a way of branching the scenario into different paths. So in this way, you can perform a specific set of action based on a specific set of conditions that you define on a filter, or you can perform different actions in a parallel way. So let me show you a couple of examples of router and how they work. So here we have an example of an onboarding form. So what is happening here is we have an onboarding form, and then from that form we perform a specific set of actions. Here we use the router to divide the set of actions that we have. So in this way, here we don't have any kind of filtering over here, which is the part that we will see in the other example. But we just use the router in order to get a better division and a better organization of the workflow over here. So as you can see over here, what we have is we have one route which is related to Google Drive automations, one route which is related to Slack automations, and one other route which is related to adding a client to a software, for example. So in this way, you can branch out and divide the different parts in a way that makes sense, and also in a way that makes it easier to modify different parts of the system over here. One thing which is very interesting and that will become really useful later down the line in the more advanced workflows is the feature related to ordering the routes. So if you right click on the router module, you have one field called order routes. So if you go over here, you will see that each of the router has a specific order, meaning this Google Drive automation is the first one, Slack is the second one, and then Add Client to SmartLead is the third one. This means that the automation is executed in the following way. So as you can see here, they show the perfect example of how the automation is executed. First off, we have the router related to Google Drive. Secondly, we have this Slack automation router. And then thirdly, we have this last part over here. So the order is pretty important when it comes to the developing the specific action in a sequential order. But like in this specific case, is not that relevant. But yeah, keep in mind this feature because it will come really useful later in the future. The next example of router that I want to show you is the following one. Here we have a support ticket. So we generate a support ticket, whether we have a bug or a problem or whatever the case might be. And then here we route that based on the priority level of the support ticket. So what is happening over here inside is we could have two different priority levels. We could have a priority level which is urgent, and then we could have a priority level which is normal. And in this way, we can route the flow and decide what to do based on that specific information. In this stage is where filtering is really important, because what we can do over here is we can set up a filter. Filter basically allows you to pass or don't pass specific specific bundles of data based on the condition that you define. Over here, you can define the condition. So you can define conditions which are simple condition, and you can go pretty crazy with this because you can also add different functions and different things, which is a part that we will see in the next lesson. But let's keep it simple right now, and let's focus on a support ticket example where we send information to the support ticket over here. What I did right now is I generated some data to have over here. So here we can have different priority levels as one of the elements over here. So if we need to set up the filtering right now, we can go over here. Within the condition, we can define what we want to check. So what is the specific value that we want to check? In this specific case, we want to check the priority level, and we want to make sure that the priority level is equal to high. So if we go over here, we can select high as one of the values. Keep in mind that over here you will find different operators that you can use, and different operators could be related to specific types of filtering. So for example, if we want to check if a value exists or doesn't exist, we can use the basic operator. There are also all sorts of different text operators that we can use, such as equal to, not equal, starts with, matches pattern, which is also really powerful because you can use regex within it. And there's also like other stuff like numeric operator, datetime operator, time operator, booleans, array operator, all sort of things. So yeah, there's a lot of possibility over here. We want to keep it simple and just use the text operator for the moment, and later on maybe we can also see a couple of other examples over here. So let's set this to high. In this way, we set it up a filter to make sure that if the priority level is equal to high, then we pass the information through this specific route. One important thing that you also have to keep in mind is that if you don't add any filtering, what will happen if you have a priority level of I, like in this following case, is that the flow will go at the top first because this is the first order route, and it will pass because of the condition over here. So I will notify the team and create a ticket. But if here there's no filtering, it will also pass down here and create another ticket. So when you need to do operations where you need to either say if it's not if it's I or no, what you need to do is to always create the two filters. So one for the actions and one for the opposite action, or what you want to have in that specific case. Let's look at functions now. So functions are different way to transform the data, create different conditionals, extract values, and overall make your scenario more dynamic and more efficient. You can use function instead of using a specific module, for example. So in that way, you can also save operations. And let's have a look at the most common functions and how those can be actually used. We will start first with the if function. So what I did over here within make.com is created this this output with different information from a specific user. So in that way, we can use this information to make sense of the different functions. We will start first with the if function. So what we will do over here is we take the tool, we take a set variable, and the thing that we want to do over here will be to check what is the amount in the account balance, and if the amount is over 1000, for example, output premium user. Otherwise, we want to output standard user. So here we can define a variable name such as user type, for example, and within the variable value is where we will create our own function. So over here you will have the functions displayed all across the different make.com parts. Just keep in mind that the division of the function is based on the data type that you're gonna use. So math functions will be mostly related to operations that are involved in number. String functions, text and binary functions are mostly related to text operations. Date function, which we will check in depth, array functions, and then also here custom system, which are not functions. But let's start with the if function over here. One thing that you can do all the time for every single function is you can over and see the function and see how that can be constructed. So for the if function over here, we can see that we have the expression. So what is the expression that we need to evaluate? And then we have the value if that expression is true, or the value if that expression is false. So let's start with this one over here, where we have a if function, and we want to say that if the account balance is over 1000, let's print output user. So we have account balance over here, which we can have a look and see that it's a number. So we can go over here, and down here we have the operators related to this. So we want to say if this is greater than, let's say 1000, let's output premium. If not, we want to output standard. Okay, so in this way we will only get one single output out of this tool variable. So if we save and run this, over here we will see that the user type is set to premium, because what we have over here in the account balance is 1500. Then what we can do over here is we can modify the JSON so that this is different, and we set the account balance to 500. And let's run the scenario again. And over here you can see that this changed to standard because we use this specific part. The second function that we are going to check is the if empty function, which is near the if function. So this returns the value number 1 if that is not empty, otherwise it will return the value number 2. This is really useful when it comes to actually always having some kind of data related to a specific variable. So in that way, you don't have any kind of problem. So an example that we can use over here will be to use the if empty function to check if we have a first name. So what I will do right now is I will create a variable by following the naming convention that Make uses. So double brackets 1 dot first name, and then use a close bracket. In this way it will search for this value into the user data, and if this value is not present, we will take the name value. So in this way we will always have some sort of name. So if we click on OK and click on run once, as you can see over here we have John Doe as the value, even though we didn't have this first name value. Another thing that you can check is if we just have this first name and do run, as you can see over here, the name will be empty. So this is a very cool function to prevent specific things from happening. Another function that you will use a lot within your make.com journey will be the get function. So this is very useful because it will return the value path or an object of an array. And if you are accessing specific parts, you can use dot notation. What does it mean is something that we will check right now. So let's type on the get, and over here we can either define an object or an array. So in our example, what we want to define is we want to define purchases, for example, which is our array. And we know that within purchase we have items, we have price, and we have data. So what we can do over here is we can check for the first element within purchases and see what is the result looking like. So let's start with this first element. Click on OK, click on run once. And over here, you see we get a collection. So the reason why we get a collection is that if we go to purchases over here and we check for the first element, as you can see over here, we have a collection. What we can do over here is we can also modify this number. And for example, we want to have the third number over here. And if we run this again and we check this, we see that we have the iPhone as the element, which will be the third element over here. Another thing that you can do, for example, in this case, we have a collection, is you can use the dot notation. This means that if you want to access specific things such as the item, for example, you can select the array, such as the third array, use the dot and then say item to access the third item in this example. So if we click on OK, if you run this, you will see that we will have iPhone as the element and not a collection anymore. The get function is really powerful when combined with the map function. So if we go over here and check for the map function, you can see that it returns a primitive array containing values of a complex array. This is a very difficult way of explaining that, but it simply means that you can take a more complex array, like for example our purchases array, and create a simplified version of that array. So you know that purchases array is an array of different elements or different of different collections, and each collection has an item, a price, and a date. So what you can do with a map function is you can add an array over here as an example. Here you define the specific key for filtering. I think it's defined in this way. Yeah, it's the key for filtering. And in this case, we want to use the item as the key for filtering. And so we rename this. We'll click on OK, and then let's check this. As you can see here, we got an array, and the array that we got is an array of items. So we took this array of purchases over here, and we deconstructed this into a more simpler array with only the element items as an example. This alone is really powerful, but one of the really cool features is that you can also add an additional layer of filtering. So as you can see over here, what you can do is you can add a key for filtering. So you can add, for example, the item element for filtering, and then you can mention what could be possible values that should be included. So if we go back over here, let's say, for example, we want iPhone and then we want a television. So let's add those over here. And now you will see what I mean by this. Now, here's an explanation of the function over here. So out of the purchases array, take the items where the item itself is either iPhone or television. So what we can do right now is we can click on OK, we can click on save, and then we can go over here and test this out. So as you can see over here, we got the mapping part, and we just got the iPhone and we got the television as part. So in this way, you can do further filtering over here. Let's remove television and let's just have the iPhone and run this again. What we have again over here is we have just the iPhone, for example, as one element within an array. Now, how do we get that specific element? That is where the get function comes into place. So here we can add our specific array that we created over here. We can define the element number 1, which is the only element which is present within the array, and then we can click on OK. So if we run this, we will see that the response will be iPhone. So this will not be within the array, but will be an actual element present over here. So this gave you at least a glimpse of what the mapping function can actually do. Let's continue with a couple of other examples. So let's say that we have our list of elements over here, and we want to have all these elements into a single line, into a single string. So what we can do over here is we can use the join function. The join function will accept an array within, and then it will accept a separator. So in this way, we can actually separate the values using a separator that we define. So if, for example, we define a comma, that will be used as our separator. So let's click on OK and click on Run. What we will see over here is that all the elements which were present here in an array will be displayed over here using a comma into a single string. Another thing that we can do is we can use comma space, which will do a better job at formatting everything over here, as you can see. Now, let's say, for example, that we want to extract the domain that we have over here from an email. This is a very common thing that you will do over and over again. So how we can actually do that? Every single email is composed in the following way. You will have the name or a name plus surname. You will have the @ and then you will have the domain. So what we want to do over here will be to just have this example.com as a domain. What we can do within the text and binary function is to use the split, which is here. So the split allows you to take a text, use a separator, and in that way it will create an array. So in this instance, for example, what we will do is we'll take the email and as a separator we will use the @ so in this way we can create a domain. So let's run this once, and as you can see over here we have the domain and we have two parts. We have John Doe and then we have example.com. One thing that we can do right now is that this value is actually an array, so we can treat that as an array and we can use the function related to an array. So one of the functions which makes the most sense over here will be to use last, which takes the last element of an array. The domain will always be the last element of an array. So in this way, we can actually get the domain in the correct way. So if we click on save and we run this again, as you can see, we got the domain with this specific thing. Now you saw which are the variables which are the most useful and the one that are used the most. Let's also see a couple of other variables into each of the sections. Let's start with the text functions. So over here we have lower, for example, which converts all the character in the text into lowercase. So like the example here is pretty straightforward. If you have hello within a lower function, what you do when you run it, you will have the lowercase version. The opposite of this one will be the upper. So if you have upper over here, and let's put hello in the following way, let's click on OK, run this, and you will see that we will have the uppercase over here. The other one that you can use will be capitalize. Okay, and as you can see over here, converts first character in a text string to uppercase. So if we say hello world over here and we click on run, we will have hello world. The capitalize here only works for the first string. So as you can see over here, we don't have the second one in uppercase. So for that, we can use another function over here, which is called the start case. So if we use the start case, every single first letter of each word within a string will be in uppercase. So as you can see here, we have hello world. A couple other ones which could be useful would be the replace, which it's also something that you will use quite a lot, where, for example, you want to replace a specific word. So let's say replace the word with friends. So in this way, we will use the initial string. So this is the initial string, search for a specific word, so the string to be replaced, and then add the replacement string. So what will happen right now is we will have, instead of hello word, we will have hello friends. So let's have a look at here. Within the math functions, the most useful one will be ceil, floor, and formal number. So let's look at ceil, for example. So if we have something like a 4.4 number, it will return the greatest integer that is the nearest to that number. So in that case, if we have 4.4, it will return 5. Also, this happens if also we have 4.1, for example. So if we click on OK, over here you will see that we will have 5 as the number. Instead, floor will do the opposite. So over here we have 4.1, and in this way, if we run this, we will have 4. And also, let's try again with 4.9, for example, and let's run this, and we also have the 4 over here. The other one, which you will use some of the times, will be this parse number. So if, for example, for some reason you have a number which is in a string format, you can turn that into a number in the following way. An example that we have over here, which is perfect, is this text number over here. So as you can see, within the data, into additional information, we have this text number, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, which seems like a number, but if we go and analyze this into the bundle content, we can see over here that this is actually a text. So what we can do over here is we can add that. Here we can also add a decimal separator, but in this case, we don't need that. So if we click on OK and run this, here we will have a number. As you can see here, the number looks the same, but if we have a look at this part over here, we will see that we will have the double quotes, meaning that that is a text. And over here, if we look at the output bundles, we will have the number like so, which means that this is actually a number. Now, a couple of additional array functions that you will use a couple of times will be the length one. So over here, what you can understand is how many elements are within a specific array. So this will output a number, and it will output a number equal to the number of elements which are present in purchases. So if we click on OK and run this, you will see that we have 5, because over here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements. So this is how the length value works. Then we also have all sort of other values that you can use. One is add, where, for example, you can select an array. So if we select this tags array, what we can do is we can add additional values. And keep in mind that this will not add values to the initial array, but it will create a new one from scratch with the new values. So if we click on OK over here and run this, you will see this new array with the values of tags, which were these two over here, and then the values that we added over here, which are value 1, 2, 3. Another thing that you can do is you can use remove, for example, so to remove a value. So for example, we had premium, and what we can do is we can click on this to remove that value. So in this way, you will have a new array, which just beta user instead of beta user and premium. We haven't spoke about date and times in the last section because I wanted to have a section specifically related to that, since in Make there are different time formats, date formats, time zones, or whatever the case. So it would make sense to have one specific question specifically related to that. So what we will do right now is we will see what are the most common functions within Make, and we will use those in a couple of practical examples. So I will start with the format date, which is the first example that I would like to use over here. First off, what we will do is we will start with a date, and the date will have a variable name of now. Now gives back the current date and time. One thing also to keep in mind over here is that the date type that we have over here is a date, and this will be very important later on when we deal with time zones and those things of that nature. Right now, I will add a date over here, click on OK, and click on Run, so you can see what is the output looking like. So here we have an output, which is a date again. which is formatted in a way that makes it readable for us in our specific time zone and our specific local. So in here we have the 16th of October 2024, and this is formatted in my own time zone, so 9:22, which is actually correct. The first thing that we want to see is the format date, which is a way of formatting the date in a specific way that we want to. So let's say that instead of having this specific format, we want to have a format like the year, the month, and then the date. What we can do over here is we can go to the date and time section. Down here we have this format data which we can choose, and within this format data we can add a date, and this should be a date element like the one that we have over here. And then over here we will have the format. The format, it's something that you can find within make.com, and within make.com you can find the format that you can use. There's this page which I'll send in the resources called Tokens for Date and Time Formatting, which helps you understand what are the formatting tokens that you can use within make.com. So if we do an example over here and we format this date in the following way, here we have here, month, day. We click on OK and we run this. What we will get is a format in the following way. One important thing to understand if we are using format date is that the output that we will get from this is a text and is not a date anymore. This is important to understand when it comes to working with date times, time zones, those kind of things. So this is this is the format. This is the format token that we decided. So over here you can also have a understanding of what is the format that we used. So here we use this year, which gives a 4-digit year, month, which gives month number with a leading 0, and then date, which gives us a day of month with leading 0. So yeah, those are the things that we used. But if, for example, we want to use a month abbreviation, we can do that over here in the following way. So we do year, month, day. Click on OK, click on run, and then over here, as you can see, we have the year, we have the month of formatting in the following way, and then we have the date. Now let's see how we can actually add hours, days, or minutes to a specific day. So there are a couple of different functions over here, which are the add seconds, add minutes, add hours, add days, add months, and add years. So over here, what you will need is you will need to have a date, a number, which is related to what you want to add, whether that is years, month, days, hours, minutes, or seconds, and it will output back a date. So if, for example, we choose days over here and we add this date over here, and we click on choose, we click on OK, and we run this. In the output over here, we have the 18th of October with the same time zone. So what it did, it basically took this initial date and added 2 days to this. One way where this will be used a lot will be to use also negative numbers, so you can go back to specific dates. So if, for example, you use -1, you take yesterday as a date, and if you click on OK and click on run this, you will see that we have yesterday as a date. I'm saying this is useful because in a lot of different workflows, if you do reporting or if you do some kind of actions like that, it makes sense to start getting data up till yesterday, because yesterday has all the complete data. Meanwhile, today doesn't have that. But yeah, that is a specific thing. Another set of functions that you can use over here is this set hour, set day, set date, set month, whatever. So in this way, you can actually change some values within a date in a way that you decide. So for example, if we want to set if we want to have the date of yesterday, but over here it starts at 9:30 and we want this to start at 00, so at midnight. What we can do over here is we can add a function on top of it and say set hour. So here we decide the hour. As you can see over here, it returns a new date with the hour specified in parameters. So what we can do over here is we add this element as the date, which is yesterday. We click on the comma and point, and then here we can add the 0, close this, and if we run this once, we will see that we have 0, 0, 30. But what we can also do is we can also add another function on top of that, which could be set minute. And within set minute, we add a 0 again over here. And in this way, we will have the formatted way at 0, 0, 0, 0. Another operation that you will use a lot of time is the parse date. So let's say you have a number like the following, where you have year, month, and the day, and you want to parse this number from text to actual date. So as you can see, this doesn't have the format of a specific date, so we cannot do operations related to dates. So the way you can do that is you can use the function called parse date. Within this function, you need to add a date string as an input, so a text like the one that we had. We need to specify the specific format and then possibly also add a time zone, and it will return a date format. So if we go over here, we say date, and we define the format, which in this case is year, month, day. We close that and we run this. We'll see that the format over here is 13 September 2024. So this is actually correct. Here are also a couple of additional examples that you can use. This one is to set the day as yesterday and format this in a specific format. So what is happening over here is, first off, we define the date as to date. We set the minute to 0. So in this way, if now is, for example, this date over here, which is the 7th of October, we set the minute equal to 0. We set the hour also equal to 0. So in this way, the date will be formatted so that we will have the correct date. So we will have the 7th of October, but the hour will be set to midnight. Then what we add over here is we add some days and we subtract 1. So in this way, we will have yesterday as the date at midnight, obviously. And finally, we do the date formatting. So when we do the date formatting, we decide a specific way of formatting this. And for example, we want to use the ISO format, which is this year, month, day, and this T stands for time. And in this way, we define the actual time. So in this way, we will have a formatted day as yesterday, which could be useful for different automation scenarios, adding data within APIs and things of that nature. We saw plenty of different features and skills, but one single thing that differentiates the experts from the amateurs is the ability to use error handling and the ability to deal with error within make.com in a correct way. So error handling is the practice of managing and responding to issues that might appear to your specific scenario. And by enabling error handling, you can do a bunch of different stuff. You can prevent error from happening, so the scenario will not stop running. You can notify the right people if you have specific problems related to a scenario. You can also log errors so you know what was wrong and how you can fix that. So right now, let's see a couple of examples of how error occurs. So within Make, there are different kinds of errors that you can see. So over here, what I added is I created a couple of examples. So first off, we have a ChatGPT module where we don't have anything within the messages over here. So if we try to run this module only, we will see that we will have a runtime error. This means that we didn't provide the actual information in order to finalize this, or we provided the wrong information. So in this case, it mentioned that it expected a string, so a text, and we didn't provide anything over here. Another example that we have is this parse JSON here, where we try to parse an empty string. A JSON is generally a between curly brackets. So if we parse an empty string, it means that the file doesn't have the required inputs. So we will get this bundle validation error. Another example that we have over here is if we try to parse a number which is not a number, for example, or if we try to perform different operations which are not intended for a specific type. So in some instances, Make is pretty good at assuming different things and performing calculations for different things, but it's not always the case. So over here, we got a data error, for example, where it mentioned that E is not a valid number or using unsuitable separator. So this is another error that we could get. And the last one here that I have as an example is the one related to working with an API. So over here, you might be working with an API and you might be getting an invalid configuration error because you didn't add an API key to the API. So this actually doesn't work in the correct way. So those are just a couple of examples. Keep in mind that there's a full guide related to different kinds of examples that you will see, but you will generally have an error when you will see this red pop up over here with all the information about that. So what are error handlers? Those are ways that allow you to manage error when they actually occur. So this gives you an additional layer of control when you're working within a scenario, because if, for instance, you have something that doesn't work for a specific set of reasons, maybe, for example, you have an API that is not available at that specific time. Maybe the input that you received isn't the input that you really wanted. Maybe you have a set of actions that you need to do and you only need to do one set of action because you don't have all the information. So error handlers are a way of determining the next step and ensure that the automation works as intended and doesn't actually stop. So in that way, you can better handle all the failures. And we will see a couple of examples for that. In order to add an error handler, it's fairly simple. What you will have to do will be to right-click on a specific module and you will find the option Add Error Handler. So if we go back to Make over here, for example, we can select one of the various errors that we have over here. And if we right-click over here, we can add Error Handler. So you will see this bubble with a different connection over here, which is like a transparent connection. And over here, you will have the error handlers that you can use. There are different kinds of that, and let's look at each of them over here. So first off, we have the break. The break is to stop the scenario and restart the scenario after a specific amount of time. This is always used all the time when it comes to API and handling API problems, because what you will see a lot of the times could be problem related to 500 errors, so server errors, meaning that the API doesn't actually work in that specific time, or you will see, for example, errors where you made too many calls to a specific API, so you need to wait in order to make additional amount of calls. So break is probably the most used error handler. The second one is commit, that stops the scenario and marks the execution as a success. So let's try to add the commit to this scenario over here, for example, where we have an error over here, which is always an error. And if we run this, what we will have is we will have an error over here, which is handled by this commit, and this commit makes the operation a success. So if we go back to here and if we go back to history, over here we can see that the status of the execution for this specific operation, this specific workflow, was marked as a success. This is not very useful in a lot of cases, but we will see in the next section where I explain advanced concept how this can actually be used in a very smart way. Another type of error handler that we have is the ignore one. So the ignore ignores the error and removes the bundle from the scenario, and the scenario continues to run. So let me show you an example over here on how the ignore part could be used. So what we have over here is we have an array of two elements. We have hello and the number 1213. We iterate over the array, and then once we iterate that over the array, we parse the number that we have inside. So in this way, we'll surely have an error when we enter the hello, but we will not have an error over here when we enter 1213. So if we run this and check this, as you can see, here we have an error, which is a data error. And if we go over here, this was ignored. And so, as you saw, the scenario was not stopped over here, and we actually got a result in the end over here. Meanwhile, if we remove this and we try to run this, as you can see, we will have an error and the scenario will not stop. The fourth error handler is called as resume, which specifies substitute mapping for when a module outputs an error. The substitute will be used, and then we will have a result using this substitute. So let me use the same example of prior in order to work with this, and let's add a resume over here where we can add a format number over here. So here we can add no number, for example, no number provided. Click on OK, and what we will have over here, if we run this, is we will have one error, but the format number will have a value over here. So both in the first operation as well in the second operation, the format number will have a value. In the first operation, the value will be this no number provided. Meanwhile, in the second operation, it will be the actual number over here. So if we go and look at the final variable over here where we check the result, if we look at the first one, as you can see, we have this no number provided, and in the second one, we have this 1213. The last error handler that we can use is the rollback, which actually stops the scenario and marks an execution as an error if something is blocked. This is something that personally I haven't seen used. This is only used maybe when it's really, really vital to show a specific error because it blocks the old scenario or some reason like that. So if we run this over here, for example, and we add an error handler or rollback over here, by running this, you will see that we have an error because we had an error over here, which stopped the scenario and prevented everything from happening. One thing over here that we can also check is that if we change the order of the elements and run this once, you will see that in this case we got an error for one specific operation, but the other one worked correctly. So even though the operation was finalized, we still that was still marked as an error within make over here. So again, this is something that I personally never used and never seen used, but it's definitely within the arsenal of more advanced practices when something is really, really important and you want to identify all the errors. One additional thing that you can do, even this is more on the advanced side, is you can customize the error handling path and do whatever you want with a specific error handling path. So here is an example that I have where I created a system where we just get one or another specific variable. So in that way, we are able to mimic two different types of error. I know this is convoluted to show you the errors, but stay with me. So what we are doing over here is we are defining the error handling path, and over here we have a router to describe two different types of error that we might get. So here, for example, we might get a 400 error, and in the other path we might have a 401 error. And so as you can see over here, we have two different ways of handling that by adding a different message over here. And what we can also do is we can add the different error handlers if we wanted to. So if, for example, this would be something like a 500 error, which is like a server error, what you could do is you can add a break over here, which means that it will retry after a specific amount of time. Or in the other instance, what you could do if you got a 401 error and this is vital for you you can use a commit and stop this scenario altogether. So this is this is an example of a possible thing. Now let me go back to the document over here and show you a couple of examples of possible ways of handling different errors. So what we have over here is a 504 error, which is a server error, meaning that what you can do over here is you can use a break, and this means that you can retry to run the API after a specific time because maybe it was a network error or maybe the API limit exceeded or something along those lines. So this is the break one is probably the one that you will use the most when you will work with API directly. Another possible thing could be something like this, where you can add alerts or notification when you have a specific error, and then you can add a break after that in order to rerun this and make sure that this actually works. So in this way, you also have a log of what is actually happening, and you don't have any problems related to that. And one last option that I have over here is to resume a scenario if an action is not vital every single time. So what we have over here, this is part of our onboarding, is that we have different ways of setting connections for our clients. And if, for example, one of our clients doesn't have Monday or doesn't have Klaviyo, we can use the resume module in order to keep the flow going without having to stop just because they don't have that specific thing, which is not important for us in that specific instance. One last thing in regards to this is that you can look at the execution history, and within the execution history, you can see a detailed log of every single scenario, as well as which are the errors, and you can have a troubleshooting of that. So if we go over here into this make errors, which was the one that we ran, and we go back to details of one of them, what we can see over here is we can see the exact error that we got so that we can investigate that, understand what kind of error handlers to add, and prevent this error in the future. Up until the point, you see plenty of features on how to use make.com, but in this last session, we'll see the advanced practices that distinguish every beginner from an actual pro to this tool. So with that said, I want to show you 3 specific examples of different things that you can do that will enhance your scenario, increase the efficiency, and improve the way you're gonna work with this tool. The first practice that we're gonna see is how to send information across scenario. This is very important when it comes to maintaining scenario easily, and also if you have an execution time that surpasses 45 minutes. So here we have a practical example. Let me show you also the make one for that. So this is a way of doing reporting for a cold email agency, and this is handling every single part of the reporting. One problem with this is that if you have too many campaigns or too many clients, this reporting automation could last for a very long time, leading to some problems with the last campaigns that are present. So what you could do is instead of having a system like the following, what you could do is you can break everything up into different flows and subflows, like in the image here. So you have a main flow where you have exactly the same thing as you have at the beginning, and then you have three different subflows where you send information across. So let me show you an example over here. Here we have this version for the daily campaign check, which is essentially the same as this one, only the beginning part of that. So up till this point, and then what we do over here is we have a router, and then we send information across various other scenarios. So in this way, what we actually do is we use the HTTP module to send information to a webhook. So we bounce information within Make. In this way, we are able to send different information directly within Make by creating our own API calls within the tool. So in this way, you can have a scenario like the following, where you extremely simplified the initial version, and if you go back here, you can see each single component is divided in the following way. So the real advantage of this is that every single campaign runs in a separate way over here in the following way, and you also have a better visibility when it comes to the data that you're actually receiving. So this is a really powerful tool that you can use a lot of the time, and it will save you also in terms of designing very complex workflows, because when you are designing something that seems too complex, the best thing is to break it down into different parts and create different subflows that handle different logic. In this way, you also have better debugging capabilities, and you can see the flow more clearly on your side. The second example that I have for you is how to handle pagination. So when you're working with APIs, some of the times you will need to use pagination, because if you have large amounts of data that you need to fetch from an API, the API probably is going to give you only some part of the data, and then you need to recall the API in order to get all the data. In general, when we are doing this in coding, we use a while loop. So we make sure that we get all the data, and we only stop the loop once we get all the data. But in this case, Make doesn't have this actual functionality, so we need to find different ways of doing that. Let me show you an example of pagination directly over here. So what we have over here is we have these lead labels. Within these lead labels, we have all the information that we need, and then over here we call this API to get the lead labels. Basically, what this allows us to get is a list of different leads that are labeled within a specific way. So for example, those are interested lead or contacted leads, or whatever the case might be. If we go over here and check the data, we will see that we have this data collection and an item array, and the item array has over 50 different collections inside. So what happens over here is we have a router with two different rows. On one side, if the amount of people in the lead list from this initial lead label is less than 50, we output a response that we can use. So we output a response to the API. On the other side, we need to proceed with the pagination. So what happens here is we check for the length of the items equal to 50. So if we have 50 elements, then it's a sign that there might be additional elements over here, and then we need to start this actual part. So here we do a couple of specific things. First off, we set the lead number and the page trail ID. Now, this is the way this API creates the pagination. There are different ways of handling pagination, but this API, for example, does takes the information that is present in the last element of the items, so this ID over here, and it needs that ID as a page ID to call the next batch of 50 different items. So yeah, here we have the list of leads, and then we have the page trail ID. Then we start using a repeater over here. The repeater basically repeats the same action over and over up to a specific amount that we define. So if we go over here, we can say that here we have an initial value of 1, and then this repeats a maximum of 10 times. So in this instance, for example, we might have a maximum of 500 leads that we can collect from this one. This is also important when it comes to actually designing the system, so we need to make sure that this number is high enough. But yeah, let's go back to the history, so I can show you a couple of additional things over here. Then over here, what we do is we get the leads and page ID that we defined over here. The reason why we get those is not important in the first instance, but it's important in the future instances. So in the first operations, what we have over here is we have the leads, and then we have the page trail ID that we defined in this block over here. Then we start and we do the actual operation over here to do the pagination and get the actual information. So in this way, we do this specific operation, and we get 50 items again. Then the next step that we do over here is we set the leads and the page trail. So in this way, in the first operation, we set the number of leads to be the previous number of leads that we had over here, plus the number of leads that we have over here, which in this case is 50. And then we set the page trail ID, which we will use for pagination in the next iteration. Over here, what we have is we have a filter. So we continue with everything, and we continue with outputting a response only if the data.items is less than 50. If this is less than 50, it means that it completely finished iterating over the leads, and it finally gave us an actual number that we have over here. So if this is blocked, what happens then is the flow restarts from the repeater over here. So we are in step 2 of the repeater. Once we are in step 2 of the repeater, if since prior we use this get leads and page ID, now we will use this again, and the values that we take here are this 100, and then the page trail ID that we defined over here in the set multiple variables. So the importance of having this set multiple variables over here is that we can get the new variables with a new cycle in this stage over here. So in this stage, we will have leads of 100, we will have a new page ID, and then we do the same operation over again. Over here, we call the API, we check that we have 50 leads. So we set the information to be 150 over here, and a new page trail ID, and then the cycle repeats over and over again. The cycle, in fact, repeats until step 7. So if we go over here and we check for step 7, we can see that we just have 2 items over here. So it will go to set the leads and page trail. So it will set our leads to be 352. And the system will proceed further over here because the lead data is less than 50, and finally output an actual response over here. Now, there's a little bit of a problem when using the repeater, and the reason is that you cannot stop the repeater. You cannot stop the repeater manually. So you need to create some way of actually stopping the repeater without compromising the old system. So in order to do that, what we do is we create an error on purpose. And by creating this error on purpose, we set an error handler here of commit in order to stop the execution. So if I go to the diagram here and I show you the example over here, what we do here is we parse a JSON to be an empty string, which always gives us an error because this is something that cannot be done. And since this is an actual error, what we have over here is we have a commit that says, hey, don't worry about this error, this is a success, there's no problem with that. In this way, we are able to actually stop this repeater and not proceeding further and repeating the same loop over and over for 10 times, but we can stop at 7. So this is the actual way of how you can handle pagination within Make and how you can use the repeater at your own advantage by stopping that whenever you want to, by creating some errors by automatically creating errors. The last advanced practice that I want to show you is how to save operations using something like Airtable, Google Sheet, or whatever the case might be. So if you're using some kind of system to store information, you might be spending a lot of operation by searching where is an actual row by its name and then updating that. So right now we will see an actual solution to that, and I will explain also the problem a little bit further. What is happening 90% of the time when you are working with this kind of system and when I audit different accounts from my clients is that I see the following. I see one Airtable block to search for a specific element, whether that be a client, an email, a campaign, whatever the case might be. It searches for an element, and if that element is found, it adds that elements or updates that elements within the system. The problem of doing this is that this is highly inefficient when it comes to scaling the operations 10 times, 100 times, 1000 times, whatever the case. If you need to do the exact same operations 1000 times, you essentially are spending 2000 for every operations like that, because you need to search on one side and on the other side you need to update that. So what I want to show you right now is a way of actually solving this actual problem. This is a system that we use for one of our clients to get all the sender emails that are using for cold email. Now, I want to explain what are all the dynamics related to cold email to you, but I want you to understand what is the actual flow of the system and how this actually works and what are the actual information that we have over here. So what is happening at the beginning is the following. We get all the active emails which are present within this Airtable, and then we use the iterator, the aggregator, to aggregate every single email in a single array. So in the end, we end up with an array over here. This is key, especially when it comes to the next steps. Then in this part, we did the same thing that we showed before. So the actual pagination part, where we set the offset and the data, and then get the offset and set the data. So this API, for example, uses different ways of getting the data. In this way, it uses the email accounts as an offset, and yeah. The cool stuff comes here. So here we have two different routes. We have one route that is used to check whether an element is present within Airtable but not present within SmartLead, the email platform that we use. And if that element is not present, we delete the element from the base. So what we are doing here is we are iterating over the Airtable emails, which is the part that we found over here in the aggregate emails. And then we use a filtering. The ability to use a filter efficiency over here is what makes the difference between spending 2000 operations and spending 1000 operations. So if we look at this filter over here, you will see that there's a specific structure that we used over here. So The first off, the email addresses element over here comes directly from this block over here, which is the bulk of all the emails that we got from the system. So those are emails that are used for cold emails. So those are actual sender emails, and a lot of different emails are used in that regard. So what we do over here is the following. We use the mapping function to take this array of email addresses, which is all the emails that are present within SmartLead as a system, and then we just want to have the ID of those emails. In the mapping part, you can do an additional step and you can filter out elements for a specific value. So we want to use the ID as the key for filtering. So we want to say filter for ID that contains email ID. So in this way, what we are actually saying is check within the actual emails that we have within SmartLead as a system and give us all the ID where the ID is equal to the value of the email that we are iterating on. This is super, super cool because in that way, the actual element that we have is only one and is the element that we want to find. The next step that we do is we use the get function to get this single element. And then we check whether that element exists or not. If the element does not exist, it means that the element is present within Airtable, but is not present within SmartLead. And so what we do is we delete that element from Airtable. So this is a way of using that. Now, bear with me because we are also handling a couple of more complex use cases. So what we did over here instead is we are iterating over all the emails that are present within the system. So the SmartLead emails, the email addresses that we defined beforehand. So over here we iterated over Airtable. Over here we are iterating over SmartLead. Here we have a system to check whether that email is present or not present. So let's check for if the email is not present in Airtable first. If we go over here, we can again use the mapping function to check whether in the array, in the initial array where we have all the emails over here. So if I go to the output and also show you an example over here, in this aggregate email, we will have all the email aggregating into a single array. So here we have 1524 elements in a single array. And over here, what we are actually doing is we are combining all these elements into a single block and just using the email IDs. So in this way, we will have a simplified array just with email IDs. Within this array, what we do is we check whether this array contains the element ID, which is the actual element that we are iterating on. So in this way, it's a way of saying, use the array element of Airtable that we created, simplify this and only use the email IDs, and check whether the ID that we have that we are iterating on is not present over there. So if that is not present, it means that there's an element that is not present in Airtable, and we can add that into Airtable. So that is what we do in this instance. The other thing over here is the contrary. So if that email is present, what we do is we check whether the warm-up reputation is changed. So when it comes to cold email, warm-up reputation is something that you need to have for you need to have a high warm-up reputation for every email in order to make sure that the emails are sent and delivered in the correct way. But let me show you the actual setup that we have over here. What we do over here is similar to what we did over here in the mapping function, but a little bit more complicated. So if I go over here and show you the mapping, what we do is we map the array, so the initial array that we created, the Airtable array, and we just want to get the warm-up reputation percentage within that specific array. So that is the value that we want to map. So in that way, we will just get a list of the different warm-up reputation percentages for each of the elements. Now we want to do an additional thing, and we want to filter out the element so that we just have the element which have an email ID equal to the ID. So in this way, we actually get only one single element because the ID is unique, and if we and in this way we are able to get a value without having to do the search functionality that I showed you before. This obviously is a way more complicated thing, and that is why I'm showing you at the end of the tutorial when you're super tired and you don't understand anything. But the focus here is you can perform this kind of operations in order to save a ton of operations when you're working. So yeah, finally from this mapping we will just have one single result, and then we get the single element that we have in that array. And what we do is we check whether that element is equal or not to the warm-up reputation that is present within Smart Lead. So in that way, we are able to check for specific values, and we are able to check whether a value is equal to Smart Lead or not without using the search element. The last step over here that we have is how to get the Airtable record ID. And so we do something similar to what we did prior. So we have this array, which is the Airtable array. We just want to get the ID, which is the record ID for Airtable. And then we filter out for email ID, which equal to ID, which gives us one single result. And then we use the get to get the specific result at the end. So yeah, this is the way of getting all this information without having to spend a single operation. Or like spending very, very few operations, because filtering is not subject to operation spent. And last point that we have over here is we have the ending because we're using a repeater over here. So we need a way to stop everything over here. And we only stop everything when the bundle order position is equal to the total number of bundles, meaning when this finish iterating, we stop everything and we finalize the workflow. So yeah, this is very complex thing, but once you get an understanding of this, you are able to perform way more efficient scenarios instead of just creating scenarios that are consuming ton of operations for your clients.